your warehouse looking good while staying efficient, there's only one place to find the finest racks in the business. Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack? Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. It's time to rack it up.
Oh my God!
Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick with the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint program. Inside the Paint is brought to you by Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack?
Yeah, hell yes!
Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick with the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint show.
Are you ready?
All right, welcome into Onside Radio here on a Monday for the latest edition of Inside the Paint. Hello to everybody who's watching us on YouTube, sponsored as always by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. The phone number 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick or at 5 Reasons Sports. We've got Ira Winderman from the Sun Sentinel. You can follow him at Ira Heatbeat. Now, we've done a few of these. We do these now every Monday morning, and typically the mood is dictated by the last game that we saw. That game last night, to me, and maybe you'll find another one here, but in terms of opponent, circumstance, etc., that was the first time this year I can remember everybody who took the court playing well. Like, everybody gave them something, and I don't feel like that's been the case most of the time this season.
Yeah, I mean, that was a thing. And when that happens, Ethan, all of a sudden Jimmy and Bam can stay within themselves, don't have to overextend. I mean, one of the biggest takeaways from the weekend's wins in both Cleveland and Charlotte is that Jimmy Butler sat out the fourth quarter of both games. And that's very important down the stretch. Grueling schedule coming up in terms of competition. It was interesting because I was trying to put together a list before the game of the Heat's signature wins, and there have not been many. I mean, you can get to holding off Steph Curry when the Warriors came in, beating the Lakers in L.A., when LeBron was playing, even though they were without Anthony Davis. But
Portland win was good. There are a few, but not many.
But not many, exactly. I mean, you almost counted the game at Indiana just because of the struggles against them. And then I said, wow, well, at least this really helps their record against teams with winning records. You know what's odd last night, Ethan? Charlotte entered with a losing record and exited with a losing record. So it's so weird. You're talking about a seeding game, you know, and everyone's playing it up, and Eric Reed and John Crowder, you're talking about it on TV. But you're also playing a team with a losing record that in some ways, if you are who you think you are, of course you should have won. But we didn't know, and there was concern going into that. The schedule that follows now will be the ultimate litmus test because of the next 6, they have 7 games left, but of the next 6, you're talking about games against Dallas, 2 against Boston, 1 against Philly, 1 against Milwaukee, and here's what changes this year. A lot of people have been talking about, well, maybe the final home game against Philly, the game in Milwaukee, they won't be playing the regulars. This is the difference. Because of the play-in tournament, the top-seeded teams are guaranteed at least 5 days off. The season ends on a Sunday. The main playoffs won't begin until the following Saturday at the earliest. The elite teams will probably start on Sunday. So there's no need for Philadelphia or Milwaukee that final weekend or final week to sit their regulars, especially in the seeding race. And every team, except for Minnesota and Detroit that the Heat play, have major, major seeding concerns. I mean, you got coming up tomorrow at American Airlines Arena. We'll talk about this later when we go over the week ahead. But you got a Dallas team coming off a loss to Sacramento. But all of a sudden, you know, the Lakers falling has opened up the possibility to no play-in for Dallas. So I still think the moments of truth are at hand. And it's kind of comical how between the 3-game winning streaks and the 3-game losing streaks, there were times this year you could say, well, even right now, the Heat have won 4 or 5.
Right.
Or else you could say, yes, but they've lost 8 of the last 14. You know, there's always a way to turn it, whether the times are good or not good. So I don't think, and Jimmy Bristol did this last night, Jimmy Butler, the sort of notion they've turned it around or hit their stride, because as we know, Ethan, it just takes one misstep and it all comes crashing down when it comes to confidence.
But the reason that I thought last night was significant, and again, it did get blown out of proportion, but I do think the reason it was significant was they shut down a lot of the things that have given them problems this year. We've seen this season that, guards, the random scrub heat killer thing, guards get off against them. I mean, I thought, again, you mentioned Eric Reed. I thought Eric was going to have a coronary every time Malik shot. Malik Monk shot last night.
Weren't we all after he was all NBA in the
well,
previous two
I
games
know,
against
but
the Heat?
but the Heat were up like 18 or 20, and he's like, oh no, Malik Monk's got the ball. But look, but the reality is that has happened against the Heat many, many times this season. But there were other things that I liked beyond that. Bam Adebayo this year, when he's had a smaller big on him, has not consistently punished that big. He did last night to P.J. Washington. He was aggressive at the start. Like, we could talk about Jimmy and Bam being able to kind of coast at the end or Jimmy not play. A lot of that, though, was because of the way that the two of them started. They set the tone. I mean, both of them were on track for triple-doubles, halfway through that game. So that was the other thing. The other thing that hasn't happened much this season is, and you and I have talked about it, getting good Goran Dragic.
Yeah,
and not only that, but on the second night of a back-to-back in a game that you didn't know if he was going to play. I was looking at it. Last year during the bubble, particularly in the playoffs, Goran led them in shots a lot. Last night,
as a starter, though.
As a starter, but even as a reserve, he did it many times last season, okay, during the regular season. And last night, he had 18 shots. No one else on the team had more, I think, than 13. I don't know how many times that's happened this year. That was a formula that worked for them last year with Jimmy and Bam. I mean, Jimmy only had, 8 shots last night? With Jimmy and Bam kind of doing everything else and somebody else, often Dragic, giving them scoring. But the thing I liked about Dragic's game, other than what happened at the end of the first half, was the aggressiveness getting to the rim. It wasn't all jumpers. He made 50% of his twos. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but I don't care about the 1 of 6 from 3. I know he's a good three-point shooter these days, but he got to his spots from 2. I thought that mattered last night.
It did. There's a couple of things in play here, and that's why Goran is so smart. Charlotte doesn't have shot blockers. There was no deterrence at the rim. There wasn't the random Zeller or Plumlee or whatever they're going with, a Bismack Biyombo.
Biyombo, who made millions off one series against the Heat
and
years
it keeps
ago.
on going. It's just an incredible story through Toronto and Orlando and now in Charlotte.
Right.
But Goran is smart enough to realize those moments that if you're going to start 6'7" P.J. Washington at center and cycle through small, it's easier for him to play in attack mode. So we still don't know if he was met at the rim by a shot blocker, if it would have played out different. But again, kudos to Goran. You read the moment, you see how the game sets up, and you go from there. I thought it was really interesting. Earlier in the day, Goran shows up in the injury report with his back and his knee, and recovery was what they said. And I thought it was a deadlock he was sitting out.
Yes.
Because to put him on the injured list like that and make a statement, the NBA is very strict on their injury rules, especially because of the gambling that's coming in.
Yeah.
And so they don't want you to say, not have a guy on the injury report, and then boom, he's out. They tell you they want it to go in steps. They want you to go from questionable to doubtful to out, if that's the thing. So the Heat had to list Goran. I believe Eric Spoelstra after the game when he told us that Goran went through the treatment and they felt like he was okay. So that's still a little bit of concern with the older players. We saw that at the end of the game with Andre Iguodala. Sat out the end because of a sore hip, and now you don't know where you go from there. But they need Goran because, Ethan, again, if we're trying to go Heat long view in playoffs and not just get in, but do something, I think all of a sudden now you're locking 2 positions into the rotation. I got a feeling this is somewhere you want to go later in the show also. So if you're locking Kendrick Nunn in as your starter and locking Goran in as your 6th man, it gets really interesting to see how you round out the rotation. So that's the thing is, I think we're more certain about locking in Kendrick Nunn now than Goran Dragic yet, but you need Goran to get there also. And that's going to really have a ripple effect on the rest of the roster. These last 2 weeks are so important for that reason. Can you trust Goran Dragic? The question before had been, can you trust Kendrick Nunn?
Yeah,
yes, I can trust him. Love the guy.
Right.
Fill up a big bag of money. Have his agent stop sending us statistics. We believe in the guy. And now the next thing is Goran. So Goran, back it up, and then there'll be all kinds of confidence.
Yeah, we're going to spend the second segment on what they do if and when the 2 other guards that are out. And we love Goran, too, for another reason. He's always great at disclosing information he should not disclose. Remember last year with we knew already, but the thing about Nunn and Bam not going to the bubble and Goran.
Right.
And then last night, when Tyler and Vic come back, not if Tyler and Vic, when. And people didn't notice that on social media. But just before we get into kind of the whole idea of what they do rotation-wise, some more stuff on last night that really sticks out. One, Ariza's cutting is a big weapon for them.
He's just done every little thing that they've asked
Really
of him.
good player.
And we've gone through, Ethan, probably 4 months of the season saying who's going to be the Jay Crowder. They found the Jay Crowder. There's no more question about who's starting at power forward. And to me, that is critical that they found the guy. And I know there's another name we'll bring up also. This subtle addition to Pat Riley. The big splash with Victor Oladipo, we don't know. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the little moves, which have always been so critical to the Heat, the guys they bring in at midseason, the guys they bring in as low-cost free agents, Dedmon and Ariza have been terrific.
Well, that's the other guy. And look, the comparisons are coming up now, and you've got to make them. Now, they're not going to go 37-3 with Dedmon because they're 7-3 already. But there is a Chris Anderson-like impact that he's making at this point. I mean, you and I were covering that team, obviously a much more talented team than this. But I remember being at a practice in Portland, and LeBron was pulling one of his passive-aggressive things, kind of like we saw last night with the play-in, about how they had enough or they didn't have enough, and I don't make the decisions here when it came to getting a big. I think they'd been bludgeoned on the boards the night before, and then all of a sudden they went out and made the Chris Anderson move. Different reason. In this case, Dedmon was chilling because he was trying to rehab, and we didn't know if he was going to play. In that case, they were investigating something with Chris Anderson that they ended up comfortable with. But the impact in terms of the minutes, and it's just – I mean, not to disparage Precious or Bielitsa, who didn't come in the right shape, and I know they're not happy about that. But the reality is, like, this guy, I mean, his minutes are changing games.
The third quarter last night was the one point in the game where you said, if it's going to turn, it's going to turn now. If Charlotte's going to come out, they hit 1 3-pointer to start the third, and all of a sudden from 20 it's 17, and we're Heat, we're Heat followers, and you know what happens? You're saying 2 more 3-pointers, and now they're in trouble. And instead, the energy he provided, again, he played to every last breath. His fouls don't matter, his minutes don't matter. They're not going to be long. Spoelstra refuses to play big.
Same as Bird, remember?
But Ethan, if we're also going to discuss someone like this, then I think there's a part B to it. There are so many facets that makes Eric Holstra a great, soon-to-be Hall of Fame coach. But his abject stubbornness in other areas, why did it take so long to get some muscle and some beef into the center rotation? Why was there an abject refusal of having another big body at least available? So the fact they waited so long for Dedmon or anything else to me is another question. But what he did last night, yes, was absolutely game-changing. I mean, he might be, him and Ariza, he might even over Trevor because of impact be the addition of the year.
It's amazing. And you look at, I mean, there was one sequence last night I pointed to. It wasn't even a sequence he scored in, he had like 14 and 8 in 13 minutes or something. But he guarded 2 guys at the rim, tipped the rebound, boxed out both of them, tipped the rebound to himself, and started a break. And it's just like, I don't know. I mean, to me, again, the Chris Anderson thing, all the things you're saying are the things that we used to say about Bird.
Right.
Exhaust your minutes. Don't care about your fouls. Remember there was that push to play him with Bosch? And it was like, no. Just exhaust your minutes.
Give us 12 hard ones.
Give us 12. They had Chris Anderson on a minutes count, remember, for the first, month during that streak until they really got it rolling. But Dedmon and Ariza have been incredible, and it has made up for, some of these guys that obviously haven't panned out quite like they'd hoped. All right, when we come back, here on Onside Radio, sponsored by Pallet Rack City, we are going to get into the whole idea of how that rotation plays out when everybody gets back. Because last night, that looked like a pretty connected team. Are we injecting 2 pieces?
A guarded approach, we will see.
Well, going to play 3 guards off the bench. We'll be right back on Inside the Paint.
Onside Radio, the only choice for the South Florida sports fan.
When you're looking for curtains and blinds to create a space of your own, look no further than Bandalux. Bandalux can tailor your space to your needs. Create the atmosphere and ambiance you desire. We invite you to discover it at Bandalux.com. Explore our new solar control systems, range of sustainable fabrics, and energy-efficient solutions that can improve your well-being and quality of life. Witness Bandalux Beauty. Go to Bandalux.com or follow them on Instagram at Bandalux_official. For a personal experience, a shade above window fashions in Davie and Sunrise is an official Bandalux partner.
I'm Ryan Seacrest. First responders are people who stand for a greater purpose. They will be there for you when nobody else is, to help you, your family, your community. This is their selfless promise. This is their sworn duty, to protect, to serve, to help. They put themselves in harm's way for us. They come to the rescue at times when we need them most. First responders are making enormous personal sacrifices to keep showing up for us and fighting the good fight. Nearly 70% of all firefighters are volunteers. That means when they get injured or quarantined, they may not have a way to pay their rent or keep their family safe and fed. No matter who you are or where you live, when you call 911 and ask for help, first responders show up. Now, let's show up for the people who show up for us every day and every night.
Go to firstrcf.org and make a difference today.
It's toast. Smartest thing I did last year? Called B&T Windows and Doors and had PGT custom windows and doors installed in my house. Listen, it's spring. That means before you know it, we'll be hearing about the tropics churning. That means you need to get your home and family protected today. Call B&T right now and they'll get you installed ASAP with the best in the business, PGT Custom Windows and Doors. 954-233-0126 or bntwindowsanddoors.com. And P.S. Tell them you heard about them on Onside Radio.
BYB Extreme Bare Knuckle Fighting Series presents BYB 5. Saturday, May 15th at the fair at Taniami Park. Meet Dada 5000. See bare knuckle brawlers fight live in BYB's patented triangle ring, the Trigon. The smallest and most confrontational ring in combat sports. Early action includes slap fights as seen on YouTube. Buy your tickets now at BYBtickets.com for BYB 5. Saturday, May 15th. Doors open at 6 p.m. BYB is proudly sponsored by BMCHam.com. Your choice for gold and silver. BMCHam.com.
Now that it's springtime, it's only getting hotter here in South Florida. Make sure your AC in your home or business is running smoothly by investing in a preventative maintenance plan from M&S Air Conditioning. And M&S is a Mitsubishi Diamond Elite contractor. When you purchase a new Mitsubishi electric mini split system, you'll get a 12-year warranty. Or install a high-efficiency polarized air filter in your AC unit that captures and destroys biological contaminants to improve air quality. M&S Air Conditioning have been providing prompt, honest, and reliable service for over 30 years. Schedule service or call to get more info on our preventative maintenance plans. Call 954-421-3680 or visit ac-florida.com.
Welcome back to Inside the Paint, brought to you by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah.
It's local. It's local.
For great racks and warehouse supplies, call them at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Back to Inside the Paint. Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick.
Hooah!
All right, Ethan Skolnick back with Ira Winderman here on Inside the Paint on Onside Radio. You can catch us every single Monday here from the studios at the stadium, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Well, you can't actually see us here because we've got fogged windows and all that good stuff, but you can certainly hear us on all of the podcast platforms as well as onsideradio.com and on our YouTube channel. All right, let's get to the consequences of something good that's happened lately. Okay.
Finally.
Kendrick Nunn, we joke about it. There's an inside reason we joke about it. But Kendrick Nunn's numbers over the past 8 games are, I mean, let's just be frank, they're elite. Okay. I mean, he's basically averaging 24 and 4 on 50% shooting from 3.
It would have been one of those, Ethan, and we do this game, and you've seen it on Twitter especially, where you blindly put up statistics and say, name that player.
Right.
And most people then would give you the names of a whole bunch of all-stars based on those kind of numbers. Like, oh, well, that's Drew Holiday. You know, well, that's some elite player. And so, again, you and I, now that this is the 4th show we've done on the hourly basis, at first you start by saying, yeah, sample size. Yeah, other guys are out. Someone has to score. They've been out with this guy. Jimmy hasn't played him. Is this guy? After a month of what basically is a 4-month season, you can't do that anymore. They're legitimate, they're real, and this is so important, Ethan, they correlate with victories.
Yes.
This is a league of empty calories. We were discussing during the break here, Rookie of the Year and Anthony Edwards, and again, those are empty calorie numbers. Minnesota is not any better than they were without him. So that's where it stops, unlike LaMelo Ball, where the Hornets are a lot better with him than without him. Kendrick is real, and Kendrick is undeniable. And this is what I love about Kendrick, is Kendrick did it for himself.
Right.
This was not a GM who said, you're a first-round pick, like Tyler Hero, you have the wide latitude. This is not a coach who said, I'm going into my chemistry lab and I want to try something unique with an undersized shooting guard, so I'm going to let it play out as long as it could. No, it was the exact opposite when it came to Eric Spoelstra. And then the kid, as vanilla as he is for our purposes when it comes to interviews, did nothing but sort of keep his eye on the prize. I didn't think I would say this about him because I had my doubts also. He has been, this is an overused word, but he's been great.
No, he's been great, and he has proven himself in a lot of ways to be kind of the heat culture type player that they talk about, because you mentioned it. There is no... What's crazy is he's had these incredible peaks and valleys, right? But now he's sustained this peak. And it's the second time this season he's sustained a peak. But this feels, like you said, this is coming in wins. That's why this is different. But for a guy who's had these peaks and valleys, he is so flatline in terms of personality. Eric Reed talks about this all the time. And it does seem like at this stage, he has figured out how to sustain it. In other words, it's not just, that he gets to his spots, but it's also now he has figured out when to pass and when to shoot. That was an issue last year. He has also figured out how to not get blown up on every screen defensively.
Yes.
He has figured out how to play passing lanes. I thought that changed the game to a certain degree last night when he played the passing lane, got out on the break, and got that easy dunk. So he's giving you all of those kinds of things at this stage. He's a player you can trust to play. He's got the conditioning to play for 35-plus minutes if you need him to. And really, he's not being taken advantage of by bigger guards anymore. So it does look complete. And let's just be honest, he's the second-best shooter on the team, okay? He is the second-best shooter on the team at this stage. I mean, you don't sustain 40% at 7-plus attempts
But I want to interject
long.
one thing because I was watching the game last night sort of with a distant view because I'm curious about it. We all know the term now, especially from the Cooper Moorheads and the others and the analytics guys, of gravity and what gravity is. Here's the problem, and this is unfair. Gravity is not a product of your shooting percentage. Gravity is a product of the respect and the reputation you have. Wherever Duncan Robinson goes, someone follows him, whether he is 1 of 7 in the first half or otherwise, and that spaces the floor. Kendrick Nunn unfairly does not have gravity. He's still allowed to float on the perimeter offensively without someone within 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 feet of him. Now, it's stupid because of the way he's hitting shots, but still, that's the other part of this equation. I don't know how that works. I don't know when he's going to get gravity and this is the problem also for a guy like Kendrick Nunn. All of that and all of what you're saying about his 90, 50, and 40 might be in place. And still opposing scout whiteboards in the locker room are going to say, number 1, stop Jimmy Butler doesn't get to the rim. Number 2, don't let Bam Adebayo out-energize you. And maybe actually number 1 above all of those is Duncan Robinson, no open looks. So even with all Kendrick is doing, he's still not at the top of the scouting report. He doesn't necessarily create that gravity. And that's sort of a problem. It's not fair. It's like you almost want to say to the other teams, hey, he's good. Go defend him.
But I will say this. The funny thing about what you're mentioning is Duncan is punished the other way because he doesn't have the reputation as a defender. And so that's why you end up with a situation like last night and other nights where he ends up in foul trouble early.
He's the king of the first foul.
He's
25 seconds in, Duncan has a foul. Matter of fact, sometimes I've actually checked and look at it, and it's almost as if he has a foul before the game starts.
Right. So that is one of the problems here. But, I mean, I think if you take a look at I'm sorry. Okay. I mean, if you look at what Kendrick has done lately, I don't know necessarily that the defense is going to come to him. I don't necessarily, but I do think he's smart enough now to create the crevices in the defense that still will exploit. So, for instance, when you get to the playoffs, we know that what teams typically like to do is pack the paint and try to stop the three. They will leave the middle open, okay? And so that's why we've seen in recent years guys like Kawhi and others who can make that mid-range shot. They can find DeRozan. Okay, well, he's struggled in the playoffs, but I think that's been more mental. But a lot of these guys, they can exploit the middle of the defense. I think Chris Paul obviously is adept at that. King of that, right? And the analytics tell you it's not a great shot. But when it's the shot that they're giving you that's open in the postseason and you can't create anything else, it is a good shot. And you know who makes that shot better than anybody else on the Heat? Kendrick Nunn.
Yes, and Eric Spoelstra did a clinic during Summer League a couple of years back in Vegas, and he even said, he pointed to the elbow, the area just a foul line extended. And he said, this is the new wide open area in the NBA. No one's guarding this. And if the ball goes through the basket on a high enough percentage from here, it's a very good shot. That's what Kendrick does, is he dribbles in to the space that's provided. You know, we always talk about teams playing drop coverage and how you have to penalize them for that. You penalize them for that with either the pull-up mid-range he's making, or the teardrop in the lane. He is such a good finisher around the rim because he realizes he's a 6'2 shooting guard, and that he's not going to blow past you. He does two things as well as any player on this team. Maybe Jimmy's up there also. The teardrop where he doesn't go right at you, and the way he uses the backboard on the rim in the reverse layup, so that even though he doesn't have the size, he makes himself unblockable there. He's become a really heady player.
73% at the rim this year. I mean, that's a pre-Heat Dragic number.
And I bet you half of those are reverse layups where he still gets to his left hand and uses the rim as a way to block the defender.
All right, now I feel like this is going to extend into the next segment, but let's
you knew that.
But let's get to it, okay? I mean, there are two guards, as we mentioned. Goran Dragic says when. What is the latest that you're hearing about Victor Oladipo?
You know, it's interesting because I know you put thoughts out about hearing from various people that you thought he might be done for the season. And so I made some calls because they got exaggerated to the point where, and I hate my emails because it says one thing until you actually read the story, and it says the thought is that he might not. So I made some calls. Apparently, this is not definitively aggregator, so if you're aggregating right now, turn your radios down. There apparently is a subluxation of the kneecap.
Yeah.
And so that can be a major injury or not a major injury. It could be 3 to 6 weeks. We're at 3 weeks or so now, almost in the fourth week. So there's a possibility. Victor Oladipo is working to come back. I know that definitively. He has not given up on the season. He's trying to come back. He's putting in time on the practice floor. Like you said in the previous segment, Goran said he's been out there with his teammates. I think what has changed, Ethan, is this internally. If he comes back, great.
Yeah.
If he doesn't come back, we'll deal with it. Yeah. But unlike when he first arrived, there will be no more force feeding of him into the equation. Right now, there are minutes to be taken for one reason. Well, I'll give you the two words on that. Max Strus.
Yes.
God bless Max Strus and what he did in Cleveland against a terrible team. Yesterday, a good effort.
It's fine.
But there's still a spot there. The Tyler Hero / Victor / Max Strus slot is there. So you can easily work Victor in. If he gets on a roll, play him more. If he's struggling and tentative, play him less. And then as you go along, you can play him a little bit more. So I don't think he's fully out of the thinking. But I also did not believe that Eric Spoelstra is going to Jay Sable the trainer before every game. What's the deal with Victor? Can we get Victor? That's the difference.
Yeah, basically that is what I heard, is that they're okay either way at this stage.
They're not going to force feed it.
Right. Would they rather have him? Sure. But I do think the biggest thing that's changed from when you and I started talking about this a week ago or 2 weeks ago is that you were kind of called crazy for the idea of taking Kendrick Nunn out of the starting lineup. And I think 95% of Heat fans now would say you can't take Kendrick Nunn out of the starting lineup right now. And there is no other spot for Victor Oladipo in the starting lineup because, as you mentioned,
not in the starting lineup.
In the starting lineup, because you're not pulling Duncan Robinson out because of exactly the gravity that you're talking about. So it does become, at this stage, almost an either-or proposition, I think, because we know that Eric Spoelstra does not typically like to play more than 9. We also know that in the playoffs, sometimes it goes down to 7.5. But if you're looking at that bench, Dwayne Dedmon is getting minutes, right?
Correct.
Andre Iguodala, in some capacity, is getting minutes, even though you can argue when you take a look at the plus minus and other things this year, body of work. But it is a trust issue, okay? And you don't want to overextend Ariza. So that's 2. Goran Dragic is getting minutes as long as he's still ambulatory.
You just need him to go anywhere. You have to hope for the best, but you still need him. And I know the other name we're going to bleed into the next segment, but this is what I'll say. There is something to be said for Victor Oladipo and Goran Dragic playing together in the second unit for this reason. Defensively, you can take Goran off an island. So now all of a sudden in your starting lineup, you would have defenders Bam Adebayo, Trevor Ariza, and Jimmy Butler. 3 guys, switchable and all that. The second unit now, you would play different. You'd probably play more drop coverage with Dwayne Dedmon in the middle. So when you need your perimeter stud, instead of Tyler Hero and Goran, and God help us, especially if Andre's not playing a lot of minutes, you would have Victor in the mix also. That could work. And early on, when the Heat were hoping of keeping, and maybe still are, Victor Oladipo, and I want to get into money at some time in this show also, keeping Victor Oladipo, you wanted to sort of placate him. That's done.
That's done, yeah.
That's done. His injury got in the way. He should be appreciative for anything he gets now. And also, that's going to be a great barometer going into free agency. If he's a guy who is appreciative and willing to work through things and play off the bench, then you know you have the good soldier, like Dedmon has been, like Trevor Ariza has been. So I think there's something to be said for that also. So now we have what started 2 weeks ago, our elephant in the room.
We have our next segment on Tyler Hero. We'll be right back on Inside the Paint on OnSideRadio.com.
You're listening to the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint Show. For the best racks and warehouse supplies, call Eddie Pieta at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Or visit them at 715 West 20th Street in Hialeah. Back with more Inside the Paint at OnSideRadio.com.
There's no need to drive around South Florida wasting valuable time looking for a new or certified pre-owned Acura. Go to the #1 volume sales dealership in the Southeast United States. Craig Zinn's Acura of Pembroke Pines. Purchase with pace and space in a dealership tailored to your needs. From home buying to providing that personal touch. Contact the 2020 Satisfaction Award winner Craig Zinn's Acura of Pembroke Pines. 888-776-5123. That's 888-776-5123. Or visit them at 15601 Pines Boulevard in Pembroke Pines. Inter Miami CF fans, join us at our new home this season for all away games as we broadcast live at Dangerous Minds Brewing Company, 1901 North Federal Highway in Pompano Beach. Join Big O and Alex Dono for the live pregame, halftime, and postgame shows while we watch the games. Enjoy meticulously brewed beer on site, delicious artisanal pizzas, live music, and giveaways. So, the new home for all Inter Miami road games is at Dangerous Minds Brewing Company at the Pompano City Mall, where they'll feature all the Inter Miami games. Follow them on Twitter at Dangerous Minds B and Facebook and Instagram at Dangerous Minds Brewing, and visit them at dangerousmindsbrewing.com.
When you need your warehouse looking good while staying efficient, there's only one place to find the finest racks in the business. Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack? Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547.
Big O for M&S Air Conditioning. You know, air quality in your home and business is more important than ever. That's why you've got to call M&S Air Conditioning and let them install a high-efficiency polarized air filter in your AC unit. Folks, it attracts, captures, and destroys biological contaminants to improve your air quality. With stellar customer service, answering your call from 7:30 a.m. till 9 o'clock p.m. For more info on high-efficiency air filters and their preventative maintenance plans, visit M&S Air Conditioning at ac-florida.com.
If you're a Miami sports fan, then there's only one store to go to, and that's Caneswear at Miami Fanwear in Davie. They're your one-stop shop for all your Inter Miami CF, Canes, Dolphins, Panthers, and Marlins merchandise. They have hats, t-shirts, game day jerseys, and so much more. Located at 2511 South University Drive in Davie, and open 24/7 online at caneswear.com or intermiamiwear.com. Call them at 954-835-5597. Caneswear, the spot where Inter Miami and all Miami sports fans shop.
Keeping you informed in the world of sports. With an OnSideRadio.com sports update.
The Miami Heat picked up 2 wins over the weekend, 124-107 over the Cavaliers on Saturday, 121-111 over the Hornets last night. The Heat have moved into sole possession of 6th place in the conference. The Heat are back at the AAA tomorrow night versus the Mavericks, tip-off 8 o'clock. Here in Miami CF Club, they played Nashville SC to a 0-0 draw yesterday, and Miami picked up the point despite being down a number of players. Next match Sunday, May 9th, right here at Dry Pink Stadium. They'll take on Atlanta United. The kick set for 1 p.m. Florida Panthers, they're back on the ice tonight, skating against the Dallas Stars. Puck drops at 7, and the Marlins, they were swept over the weekend by the Nationals. They welcome the Diamondbacks to Lone Depot Park starting tomorrow. You're listening to South Florida's only local sports talk station, OnSideRadio.com.
Welcome back to Inside the Paint, brought to you by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah.
It's local. It's local.
For great racks and warehouse supplies, call them at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Back to Inside the Paint. Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick.
Hooah!
All right, welcome back on Onside Radio to Inside the Paint here every single Monday from 10 to 11 a.m. Ethan Skolnick here with Ira Winderman from the Sun Sentinel. Still got a lot to get to, so let's get right to it. We teased it in the last segment. The one guy we really haven't talked about much here because he's kind of been out of sight, out of mind lately, dealing with the foot injury, but the Heat have been winning without him, is Tyler Hero. And, all of this debate that we've had before, none or Hero, none or Hero, none or Hero. I read an interesting thread that someone put together this weekend that basically made it clear that Hero really wasn't to blame for what happened early in the season. The first 10 games of the year, there were so many of those other parts, miscast, but also playing with the Mo Harklesses and Myers Leonards of the world, and so a lot of the numbers from early in the year. But I think when you evaluate where they are now, the question becomes this, okay? If you're going to play Kendrick Nunn 30 minutes, all right, and you obviously, I guess you're ostensibly starting Duncan Robinson as a guard. I don't know who the other guard is.
I always hate that because to me, Duncan Robinson looks like a forward and Jimmy Butler plays like a guard.
But it's one or the other. But let's say it's Duncan, okay? And then, like we said, if you have Dragic, who you're gonna want to, last night Goran played 30 minutes. Now, part of that is that there was no Hero, there was no Oladipo, but he did play 30 minutes. And then we're talking about Oladipo potentially. I just don't know where the minutes are for Tyler. And is Eric Spoelstra going to go from a guy who played Tyler Hero every minute of every fourth quarter to a guy who doesn't play him at all? Is that even conceivable at this stage?
I still think there is time if Tyler makes it back, say, by tomorrow for this reason. You have a game at the end of this week against Minnesota where I think you can be a little looser with your rotation. I know they lost last time they played them, but still, and have a chance to maybe experiment and look a little bit, especially going into the next two games against Boston when you absolutely have to be whittled down to basically playoff trim at that time and what you're going to do. I can't write off Tyler Hero because when we did, he comes back with a 22-point game and looks so good also, but you have to make decisions. Now, I can shave the Max Strus minutes off easily, 12 to 14. I can get Goran down from 30 to 22 or so. So you can create the time. Ethan, the bigger problem, and again, I don't want to overstate problems, is who do you play him with and how do you play him?
Correct.
Because you're trying to minimize your defensively challenged players when you're already playing a Duncan Robinson, when you're already playing a Kendrick Nunn, when you're already playing a Goran Dragic, and that's the problem. And so now maybe it's what I almost want to see is if Dwayne Dedmon is going to be goalie, like we mentioned at the top of the show today, like Chris Birdman Anderson was, could you configure something where what didn't work earlier in the season with Tyler Hero and Goran Dragic could work later in the season because all of a sudden your backup center isn't Mo Harkless, isn't an immobile Myers Leonard, isn't Kelly Olynyk, who's no one's idea of a rim stopper, more of a rim flopper, that he goes for the charge or anything. So there's something different. So can you, this late in the season, there's one more 2-day break in the schedule. That comes up this Wednesday and Thursday. The home against Dallas on Tuesday, home against Minnesota on Friday. You also could, in a perfect world that the Heat wants, have a week off for playoff camp when you can devise something. So I still think we need to see the Dragic Hero tandem with a rim-protecting, shot-blocking big man, which I don't know if they've ever had the two of them when they've been Heat teammates.
True. On the surface, the Dragic Hero numbers together are terrible. And one of the problems, you mentioned this, I want to go back to it, that who you play Tyler with. One of the issues here is that Tyler plays best with Jimmy. And plugging him in as a backup, which is what he's going to be now, and he was for most of the season, it's going to be very hard to get him those minutes with Jimmy, especially if you're going 5 deep on the second unit, because typically, as you know, what Spoelstra did, he did it last night.
Yes.
He anchors the second unit with one starter. And so last night he did it with Nunn. He's been doing it with Nunn some, which, again, is a sign of trust for Kendrick. But he also does it with Jimmy. So there have been those moments where you could get Jimmy and Hero on the court together. If you're going to roll 5 off the bench, that becomes a little bit more complicated, okay? There's going to have to be more staggering going on. This is tricky for Spoelstra. Like, I actually think on paper, if you just looked at it on paper and said, wow, you're going to roll out a second unit of Dedmon, Iguodala, Oladipo, Hero, and Dragic. I mean, that's going to kill other second units on the surface. But as you mentioned, you have Dedmon to protect it, but it's small otherwise, okay? Not particularly good defensively at the 2 guard spots, although Oladipo, I don't know if Oladipo's defensive chops get mitigated if he's got to size up, okay? So on paper, it's interesting, and I do think it's something that if they had a training camp for a week, that Eric would experiment with. But right now in the season, it's challenging.
And this is from the franchise of the great Pat Riley quote of play 8,
Yeah.
trust 7, use 5. So you tend to get tighter in the playoffs. We saw it last year. We saw Myers disappear. We saw Kendrick disappear. So the question is, and I wanted to touch on this, and I know we got a lot of directions to go in, is do you give any long view thoughts to the short term? And the reason I'm asking this, Ethan, is this. Duncan Robinson, impending free agent. Kendrick Nunn, impending free agent. Tyler Hero under very attractive rookie scale contract, plus perhaps your only A-list trade chip in the offseason if you need to make a trade. So that's where you have to think about this also. Personally, I don't think Eric Spoelstra gives a rat's butt about the future or free agency or the trade market. He's trying to win every stinking game now to avoid the play-in. But there's also another view. But I don't think Pat exerts as much influence, one, as maybe we think, or two, that Eric, in the emotion of a game, thinks about that Pat influence of, Coach, you really got to get Tyler out there. He's a chip for us. We don't want to go into the July trading period, August trading period this year, and all of a sudden people go to Tyler, yeah, he disappeared at the end of the year.
Is there any, and we need like 3 shows to cover this question, but is there any way that you can see this group of guards, if we're going to include Duncan as one of the guards, of Robinson, Nunn, Oladipo, Hero, and Dragic all back next year? Is there any possible way, either structurally for the roster or financially?
Yes, because that might be the only way that you can keep that depth of talent in the backcourt, because there's a weird situation to play here with Kendrick Nunn. He's a restricted free agent. The initial thought was you could actually get by without extending his qualifying offer and just bring him back on a wink, wink, we'll take care of you. That's about $1.7 million against the cap. If you actually have to retain the right to match outside offers, it goes up to $4.7 million. That's called starter's qualification. The same thing with Duncan Robinson. So all of a sudden, you might have $28 million max for one outside free agent, Kyle Lowry. But if you shave $4 more million off of that, you have a number that's too low when you have to trade Tyler or do something like that. I don't think they'll all be back for this reason. And again, I'm going to get in trouble here a little bit, but I think Tyler is the only chip you could put into play and get outside veteran talent back for. So I still think there's a possibility that maybe a move, and we never got the truth on this because it's the Heat, you never get the truth, that maybe now you would put Tyler Hero into play for a sign and trade for Kyle Lowry when the Heat insist, although I'm not so sure that they weren't going to do that at the trading deadline, because things have changed. Because since March 25th, Kendrick Nunn's been really good. Because Goran Dragic has shown moments that he still can help you. Because there is the hope, even in a 4-game sample, that Victor Oladipo can energize his team also. So I think you could do that. But I think the thing with Tyler Hero is, if you don't have Tyler Hero as a factor, who are the trade chips this offseason? If you don't have enough cap space, who's the one guy you can entice a team, whether it's a Bradley Beal because the Wizards maybe implode over these final 7 games, don't make the playoffs?
What if it's a DeMar DeRozan?
Okay.
In free agency. But I'm talking about in a sign and trade, if you can't get Lowry and DeRozan to split your cap space, okay? Which I think is something that they would like to have happen.
Yeah,
but
that's low.
It's kind of low. So if that's not going to happen, then you do have to look at a sign and trade situation, correct? I mean, the hard cap comes into
Tyler
this.
Hero would be the guy because a double sign and trade with Duncan Robinson or something is way too complex. Either way with a sign and trade, you wind up being hard capped anyway. So sort of to put a bow on this segment, the problem is this with Tyler Hero is you can push him to the side now and say, hey, it happened to Kendrick last year. You saw what happened to Kendrick. He came right back. He rebloomed. So let's put this aside. But if you're looking at your longer view, because again, and we'll talk about this in our last segment of the schedule, what's the ultimate upside of this 2020-21 Miami Heat, Ethan? What's the ultimate upside?
I mean, I think it's probably second round.
getting to the second round, being competitive with a Milwaukee, Philadelphia, or a Brooklyn.
Yeah, I think
if that's the case, you have to build towards something bigger.
Right.
Because this team does not play for one and done in the playoffs. They play for something bigger. That's where Tyler Hero factors in. If you diminish Tyler Hero, then when I'm sitting there in August and maybe trying to make a trade for something that takes you to a next level, all of a sudden he becomes this summer's what Kendrick Nunn was last summer.
But you got to be super careful about this because it appears, and the other thing that complicates it, Hero and Nunn are friends. They came in together, all the rest of this. But the thing about it is that you can't make it appear purely political. And at a certain point, this is why, to me, Kendrick has pushed this from a place where I thought they could do that.
Right.
To it's become almost impossible to do that because it's just too damn obvious at this stage.
To ask him to be the good soldier we all said he's been.
You can't. Right. Just because you're like, well, we may not retain him next year, but we do need Hero as either someone we retain or a trade chip.
And here's the thing about the Heat, and they've always said they've been this, they largely have been this, a meritocracy, right, Ethan? That if you follow the culture, if you follow the plan, if you do as asked, you will be rewarded. So he's the ultimate litmus test for a Miami Heat meritocracy. I would ask Eric Spoelstra that. If he doesn't play Kendrick, I would say, Eric, isn't this a meritocracy? Right. How can this happen to Kendrick Nunn? And they know it also. And for them to back off, it'll completely erode what they try to sell as the culture. So if it's a meritocracy and we're lining things up, there's no more Kendrick Nunn question. There's only an Oladipo question. Availability still means something. There's only a Tyler Hero question. Consistency still means something.
And there may be still a little bit of a Goran Dragic question because I do think we could talk about meritocracy, and certainly Goran has earned it over the course of his time, and he still provides something that they need when he's on. But when he's bad defensively, he's really bad.
And the meritocracy part of that is this. He has a $19.4 million option year in his contract. Or you could say, Goran, we're not going to pick that up, but we love you. We're going to have your bird rights in free agency, especially if we bring Victor back. Let's find another number. That would be fair. In a meritocracy, Goran Dragic is no longer a $19 million player.
Correct.
In a meritocracy, he might be a $10 to $12 million player. So again, you can work these things out. You can avoid the tax. You can use your mid-level elsewhere because of bird rights. So again, the money will be interesting, but I think we both agree right now it's go time. The best players play.
Absolutely. I mean, otherwise you can't preach all that culture stuff and then have guys who... And we're not saying, again, for aggregators, we're not saying that Hero hasn't bought in or any of that kind of stuff. It's just very simple right now. Kendrick Nunn has been available and Kendrick Nunn has outplayed him. It's really that simple.
It's like the power ratings they do with teams every Monday. If you're rating the Heat players 1 through 12, Tyler Hero is simply below, not because of fault of his own necessarily, but because of the play of others.
Absolutely. All right, we'll be right back to talk about the schedule, where they go from here. Sponsored by Pallet Rack City. Well, hopefully not for them on Inside the Paint on OnSideRadio.com.
You're listening to the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint Show. For the best racks and warehouse supplies, call Eddie Pieta at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Or visit them at 715 West 20th Street in Hialeah. Back with more Inside the Paint at OnSideRadio.com.
On the battlefield, there's a saying America's military men and women live by. Never leave a fallen warrior behind, ever. Off the battlefield, Wounded Warrior Project operates with the same goal. Wounded Warrior Project was created to help our men and women returning home with the scars of war, whether those scars are physical or mental. Wounded Warrior Project. We never leave a fallen warrior behind, ever. Learn more about what we do at woundedwarriorproject.org.
When you need your warehouse looking good while staying efficient, there's only one place to find the finest racks in the business. Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack? Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547.
If you're a Miami sports fan, then there's only one store to go to, and that's Caneswear at Miami Fanwear in Davie. They're your one-stop shop for all your Inter Miami CF, Canes, Dolphins, Panthers, and Marlins merchandise. They have hats, t-shirts, game day jerseys, and so much more. Located at 2511 South University Drive in Davie, and open 24/7 online at caneswear.com or intermiamiwear.com. Call them at 954-835-5597. Caneswear, the spot where Inter Miami and all Miami sports fans shop.
If you're looking for a change from the everyday restaurant, then you need to get to Checkers Old Munchin German Restaurant in Pompano Beach. Brats, Wiener Schnitzel, homemade potato pancakes, pretzels with mustard, and lots of German beer. Take their famous Boot Tour Challenge, and there's now outdoor seating available in their new beer garden with live music. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram at Checkers Old Munchin Restaurant, or call them for reservations or pickup at 954-785-7565. So get over to 2209 East Atlantic Boulevard in Pompano Beach to Zagat-rated Checkers Old Munchin German Restaurant.
When you're looking to add that extra style and protection for your home or business, visit a shade above Window Fashions in Davie or Sunrise, where plantation shutters are a major part of our business, and they look great in any home. We have them in white, stained colors, and wood tones. We can even motorize your shutters like the one in the OnSideRadio.com studio. A shade above Window Fashions, 954-434-4774. That's 954-434-4774. Love the space you live in. A shade above Window Fashions.
At OnSideRadio.com, we chirp all day and night. It's time to do some more chirping with David Dwork at our Chirping the Cats report.
The home stretch begins tonight as the Panthers are back in South Florida for the final 3 regular season games on their schedule. First up, it's the Dallas Stars, a team desperate for points with the race for the final Central Division playoff spot coming down to Dallas and Nashville. The Stars are on the outside looking in, trailing the Predators by 3 points in the standings, but with 1 game in hand. It won't be easy for Dallas to keep pace because the Panthers have been one of the hottest teams in the league. Florida has gone 8-2-1 over its past 11 games, thanks in large part to the play of superstars Sasha Barkov and Jonathan Huberdeau, as well as newcomer Sam Bennett, who was acquired at the trade deadline. In just 9 games with the Panthers, Bennett has racked up 5 goals and 13 points while skating on a line with Huberdeau, who has been just as productive with 16 points in his last 11 games. Face-off between Florida and the Stars is set for 7 p.m. at the BB&T Center.
Keep up with the latest on the Florida Panthers by subscribing on most platforms by searching Onside Radio, your home for South Florida sports. Welcome back to Inside the Paint, brought to you by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah.
It's local. It's local.
For great racks and warehouse supplies, call them at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Back to Inside the Paint. Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick.
Hooah!
All right, welcome back on Onside Radio. On Inside the Paint here every single Monday from 10 to 11, sponsored by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. Let's get to the schedule coming up here. We are rounding the bend, Ira. Here is what it is. We got Tuesday night, Mavericks at home. Dallas is in that fight for the play-in. All of a sudden, LeBron doesn't like the play-in. Luka doesn't like the play-in because they may get stuck in the play-in. But it's a critical game for the Mavericks. Our old friend Josh Richardson comes back. They'd like to get rid of Josh Richardson right now.
Well, he's a free agent, and that's among the reasons Philadelphia traded him, is they didn't feel they could afford his price point, and I don't think Dallas's interest will be major. And yes, Ethan, perhaps.
Yes,
perhaps. I know where you're going with that.
Perhaps. More likely than justice, I would say. All right, but this Mavericks game, though, there are players on the Mavericks who can hurt them. Tim Hardaway Jr. has hurt them in the past, and others, but the way that they're playing right now, this is a team they should dispose of, I would think.
You know, like I was talking, you beat Charlotte last night and you're thinking you got a quality win and you're looking there at a losing record. These are the type of games that, I'll put it this way, Ethan, if they beat Dallas tomorrow, it well could fall within their top 5 wins of the season. They've had so few quality wins. You know, I'm sure they have a Luka game plan, like they have a Trae Young game plan. They'll make someone else beat them. But you know what? When it comes to random scrub heat killer, a Dorian Finney-Smith will then sit there and get 5 3-pointers, and you go, why aren't you guarding that guy? A tough matchup, especially with Dallas coming off a hideous loss to Sacramento.
Dorian Finney-Smith, by the way, a player that the Heat like a lot. He's their kind of player.
Gator.
But then after that, the Timberwolves, we know what happened last time.
Can't happen again.
Inexcusable if that happens again.
It's like I thought Cleveland on Saturday. This is the kind of game the Heat lose. You cannot do that anymore. I don't care what Edwards does. I don't care what Karl Anthony Towns does. You can't have another one of those in a season that you put yourself in the crapper because you lost at home to Detroit. You lost at home to Washington. You had those bad early losses.
The Heat should be the 4 right now, comfortably.
Yes, if they didn't have their hideous losses, so you can't overlook that. But then before you and I reconvene, starts the big 2-game set, Mother's Day, 1 o'clock, national television, Boston.
Well, and again, the thing with Boston is we don't know how healthy they're going to be. Jaylen Brown was hurt last night.
Looks serious.
Looks serious. They absolutely need him. They certainly, I mean, asking Tatum to score 40 to 60 every night is just not feasible here. I do think, though, that there is something that could work in their favor. There is a lot of pressure on the Celtics right now.
Yes.
And there's a lot of pressure on their coach. And the Heat typically have not played well in that building. We know everything that's happened over the years with various different Heat teams. But I do feel like here's, to me, the biggest factor in a game like that. Jimmy Butler came out last night, and it was playoff Jimmy, and you could tell it from the jump.
Exactly
he
what
was guarding everybody.
And I was thinking of the memories of LeBron going to Boston in moments of truth.
And Jason Tatum, if Jalen's not out there,
he's on an island. Although it's weird because he's gone from a guy who was a star to all of a sudden, my fear, Ethan, is this. That Kemba Walker becomes random scrub Heat killer.
Yeah,
and I never thought I'd talk to Kemba Walker as random scrub, but that's what he's been this year. But I still have some concern. Evan Fournier has not been the same player, still getting over COVID with Boston. Those are 2 huge games. And you know what? The biggest problem is this, is that you've already lost the 1 game to Boston. So if you just split, you lose the tiebreaker. This second game was never supposed to be played now. This was the Sunday game after they played in Washington. They arrived in Boston. They were getting on the team bus. I believe because of COVID, Jason Tatum was out that day. Jaylen Brown and a bunch of other players were in COVID protocols. The Heat had everyone healthy. And then all of a sudden, the test results started coming in that Sunday. And this Heat guy was contact traced. And that Heat guy was contact traced. And you know why, Ethan? Because they played Boston 5 nights earlier at American Airlines Arena when Jason Tatum first was coming down with it. So the shame is this is another one of those COVID moments that could bite them in the butt.
The only positive about that stretch is there's a lot of time between those games. They play at 1 o'clock on the 9th. They don't play again until 7 o'clock on the 11th. So there will be some time to heal up for guys like Dragic, Butler, Iguodala. That could be important. And then we're not going to get into it here, but the reason these games matter so much, other than the fact they're fighting with Boston right now, is you've got the Sixers and the Bucks coming up after that. And as you mentioned, those may not be gimmies. And I hate to say it, I could see the Heat putting themselves in position, and they've got a back-to-back with the second night in Detroit.
Yes.
And this team laying an egg against Detroit to end the season.
But maybe they're now over it. Maybe they've turned the corner. Look, this weekend was very heartening.
Yeah.
This weekend could have been a lay an egg in Cleveland and just look ahead to the Charlotte game, and they didn't. The team that we saw last night was a team capable of beating anyone and competing with anyone in a playoff series.
The teams we've seen other times this season are teams that get knocked out in play-ins. All right, we'll be back next week. Thanks again to Pallet Rack City. We'll be back on Monday at 11 a.m.
10 a.m.
10 a.m. 10 to 11 a.m. I'm sorry. Have a great week.
You're listening to the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint Show. For the best racks and warehouse supplies, call Eddie Pieta at 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Or visit them at 715 West 20th Street in Hialeah. Back with more Inside the Paint at OnSideRadio.com.
Hey, what's up? It's Toast. May is here, which means hurricane season right around the corner. You need to get PGT custom windows and doors installed in your house so that you're fully protected when we get a big storm coming on through. For those windows, only one place to call. My buddies at B&T Windows and Doors. They've been doing it in South Florida for decades, and they will set you up with the best of the business. PGT Custom Windows and Doors. 954-233-0126. That's 954-233-0126 for B&T Windows and Doors.
If you're looking for a change from the everyday restaurant, then you need to get to Checkers Old Munchin German Restaurant in Pompano Beach. Brats, Wiener Schnitzel, homemade potato pancakes, pretzels with mustard, and lots of German beer. And with daily specials, there is something for everyone. If you're up for a challenge, you should take their famous boot tour. Finish 30 boots of different varieties of German beer, and you'll receive half price on their beer for life. and you'll get to take home your own boot and Checkers Old Munchin t-shirt. They also have outdoor seating available in their new beer garden with live music, as well as carry-out, curbside pickup, and delivery. So, for the finest German food and beer, get over to 2209 East Atlantic Boulevard in Pompano Beach. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram at Checkers Old Munchin Restaurant, or call them for reservations at 954-785-7565. That's 954-785-7565. We'll see you at Zagat-rated Checkers Old Munchin German Restaurant in Pompano Beach.
Welcome to OnSideRadio.com. Broadcasting from South Florida to the world. No station in South Florida provides more live and local sports talk.
This is like rock and roll with no music.
Follow us on social media at OnSide Radio.
Big O for M&S Air Conditioning. You know, air quality in your home and business is more important than ever. That's why you've got to call M&S Air Conditioning and let them install a high-efficiency polarized air filter in your AC unit. Folks, it attracts, captures, and destroys biological contaminants to improve your air quality. With stellar customer service, answering your call from 7:30 a.m. till 9 o'clock p.m. For more info on high-efficiency air filters and their preventative maintenance plans, visit M&S Air Conditioning at ac-florida.com.
When you need your warehouse looking good while staying efficient, there's only one place to find the finest racks in the business. Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack? Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. It's time to rack it up. Oh my God! Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick with the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint program. Inside the Paint is brought to you by Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack? Yeah, hell yes! Here's Ira Winderman and Ethan Skolnick with the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint show.
All right, welcome into Onside Radio here on a Monday for the latest edition of Inside the Paint. Hello to everybody who's watching us on YouTube, sponsored as always by Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. The phone number 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick or at 5 Reasons Sports. We've got Ira Winderman from the Sun Sentinel. You can follow him at Ira Heatbeat. Now, we've done a few of these. We do these now every Monday morning, and typically the mood is dictated by the last game that we saw. That game last night, to me, and maybe you'll find another one here, but in terms of opponent, circumstance, etc., that was the first time this year I can remember everybody who took the court playing well. Like, everybody gave them something, and I don't feel like that's been the case most of the time this season.
Yeah, I mean, that was a thing. And when that happens, Ethan, all of a sudden Jimmy and Bam can stay within themselves, don't have to overextend. I mean, one of the biggest takeaways from the weekend's wins in both Cleveland and Charlotte is that Jimmy Butler sat out the fourth quarter of both games. And that's very important down the stretch. Grueling schedule coming up in terms of competition. It was interesting because I was trying to put together a list before the game of the Heat's signature wins, and there have not been many. I mean, you can get to holding off Steph Curry when the Warriors came in, beating the Lakers in L.A., when LeBron was playing.